When I signed those adoption papers, I thought I was saving my sister's child. I didn't know I was giving her a reason to destroy my life. It was raining the day she called, that soft, slanted kind of rain that makes the world smell like wet soil and rust. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of lentil soup, when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen, Clara, made my chest tighten. We hadn't spoken properly in over a year. The last time we did, she'd screamed at me in a hospital parking lot, mascara running down her cheeks, accusing me of thinking I was better than her. "Ruth," she said that day on the phone, her voice trembling, small. "I need your help. Please, it's about Lily. Lily, her baby girl, barely 2 years old. That's how it began. Not with rage or suspicion, but with pity." Clara had always been fragile. That's the word my mother used. I used to think fragile meant delicate, like porcelain. Now I know it means unpredictable, easily broken, but just as capable of cutting you if you tried to hold on too tight. Growing up, I was the responsible one. Clara was the wildfire. I worked part-time jobs through college while she chased love stories with men who promised things they never intended to give. When she got pregnant, she told me she was finally happy. But happiness for Clara was always borrowed. It ran out when the lies did. The father left before the baby was born. So when she showed up at my doorstep that day, soaked from the rain, holding a trembling toddler in her arms, I didn't hesitate. Her hair was matted, her eyes red. "Ruth, please," she said, voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore. I'm not good for her." She didn't meet my eyes when she said it. I took Lily from her arms. The child smelled like milk and rain. She clung to me, tiny fingers curling around my sweater. I told Clara to come inside, to rest, to eat, but she just stood there shaking her head. "Just take care of her for a while," she whispered, "until I get better." I didn't know a while would mean forever. Back then, my husband Daniel was my anchor. Quiet, dependable, always calm in crisis. He worked as an accountant for a small firm downtown. He was the type of man who never raised his voice, who remembered to bring home bread without being asked. We'd been married 8 years, no children, not for lack of trying. The doctor said my chances were low. I had cried in sterile rooms and prayed in church pews until I finally accepted that motherhood might not be written in my story. Then came Lily. It felt divine, like God was giving me a second chance through my sister's mistake. Daniel fell in love with her instantly. I would watch him on the floor, stacking blocks with her, the corners of his mouth softening in a way I'd never seen before. He'd kiss the top of her head and whisper, "You're safe now, sweetheart." For months, our house filled with a new kind of warmth. Clara called occasionally, always from unknown numbers, her voice distant and rushed. She said she was in treatment, trying to get her life together. I believed her. I wanted to. The day she asked me to adopt Lily legally, I felt both honored and terrified. She came back one evening, thinner, her hair freshly dyed, wearing sunglasses though the sun was low. She hugged Lily for a long time, then turned to me. "I want you to have her, Ruth." "Officially," she said. "I talked to a lawyer friend. We can do it clean. I need her to be safe." I didn't question it. I called our attorney, filed the paperwork, and a few weeks later, Lily was mine, at least on paper. Clara cried during the signing. "You're a better mother than I'll ever be," she said. I thought it was a compliment. Now I know it was a confession. And for a while, life was peaceful. We redecorated Lily's room, pastel yellow walls, a new crib, shelves full of picture books. Daniel began coming home earlier from work. He'd say he wanted more time with our girl. Sometimes I caught them in quiet moments that melted my heart, his big hands braiding her tiny curls, or both of them asleep on the couch, a cartoon still playing in the background. I used to think, this is what love looks like, small, ordinary moments that last. Then one night, I woke up and found Daniel missing from bed. It was 2:17 a.m. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge. I padded down the hallway, barefoot, and saw the faint glow of light from the living room. Daniel was on the couch, phone pressed to his ear. He didn't notice me. "Yes, I miss you too," he whispered. His tone, low, tender, intimate, froze me in place. For a second I thought maybe he was talking to me in his sleep, but then he said, "Clara, please, don't cry. I'm doing everything I can." My stomach turned cold. I stepped back before he saw me, pressing a hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. When I returned to bed, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself I misheard. That there must be an explanation. That maybe she'd called for Lily. Maybe he was just helping. I clung to those maybes like they could hold me together. But the way he said her name, soft, familiar, guilty, it carved something deep into me that night. And I knew, without knowing, that the peace in our home was about to unravel, thread by thread. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The clock ticked endlessly, each second scraping at my nerves like sandpaper. By morning, Daniel acted normal, cheerful even. He kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, humming as he buttoned his shirt. I stood by the sink, pretending to rinse Lily's cup, watching him. He smiled at me, the same gentle smile he'd given me every morning for 8 years. But now it looked like a mask. When the door closed, I let out the breath I'd been holding. Something inside me had shifted. A small, bitter fracture that no amount of logic could repair. That day, I moved like a ghost through the house. Lily's laughter echoed down the hall, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Daniel's words over and over. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was just my anxiety, that Daniel loved me, that Clara was family. Still, I found myself checking his phone that evening when he showered. There were no messages from her, no calls, no saved contacts with her name. But I noticed one number, unsaved yet frequent. Late-night calls, short coded messages. "Did you tell her?" "Soon. Miss you." My hands trembled. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. My husband, the man who prayed over our dinner table, who taught Lily to tie her shoes, was talking to my sister, and not about custody, not about Lily, something else. I tried to confront him that night. We were lying in bed, Lily asleep in her room. The lamp cast a warm glow across his face. "Daniel," I began, keeping my voice steady. "Have you heard from Clara lately?" He hesitated, just enough to confirm my suspicion. "She called once or twice," he said carefully, "just to check on Lily."
"Why?"
I watched his eyes. They shifted slightly, avoiding mine. "Because," I said, "I heard you last night, on the phone. You said you missed her." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel blinked. Then he sighed, sitting up slowly, rubbing his face. "Ruth, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" "She's struggling," he said finally. "She reached out because she didn't want to bother you. I've just been trying to help." His tone was calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed it. Something about the way he said help made my skin crawl. "Help her how?" I pressed. He turned to me, frustration flashing in his eyes. "You don't understand. She's broken, Ruth. She needs someone to believe in her. I can't just turn my back." His words hung between us like smoke. For years, I'd loved this man because he was steady, compassionate, the kind of person who fixed things instead of running. Now that same kindness had become my enemy. I wanted to scream, to demand honesty. But all I said was, "She's my sister, Daniel. If she needs help, she should come to me." He didn't respond. He just turned off the lamp, rolled over, and whispered, "Good night." In the weeks that followed, the air in our home changed. Daniel grew distant, not cruel, just absent. He started working late again. When he was home, his mind was elsewhere. He'd sit in the living room, staring at his phone, smiling at messages he wouldn't show me. One night, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his pants pocket, a hotel in the next town, paid in cash. When I asked him about it, he laughed. "Work meeting. We had clients in from out of state." He said it so easily, I almost believed him, but I knew. Something in his voice, that soft, almost bored tone, it told me this wasn't guilt he was hiding. It was comfort, familiarity. He wasn't afraid of being caught. He was used to it. I started noticing smaller things, too. The scent of a different perfume on his jacket. Not mine, not Lily's baby powder, but something floral and cheap. The way Lily began asking questions. Why does Daddy talk to Aunt Clara on the phone? Each word pierced me. Because she loves you, I lied, forcing a smile. She just misses you, sweetheart. But inside, I was crumbling. It wasn't just betrayal. It was absurdity. My sister, the woman whose child I had raised, was now whispering with my husband behind my back. It felt like standing in a dream, the kind where you scream, but no sound comes out. Then one afternoon, it all collapsed. Daniel came home early from work, looking pale. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He walked straight to the bedroom, grabbed a small suitcase from the closet, and began packing. "Daniel," I said quietly, "what are you doing?" He didn't answer. "Daniel." My voice broke. "Say something." He zipped the suitcase and finally looked at me. "Ruth," he said, "Clara's not doing well. She's been through a lot. She needs someone right now. I'm going to help her." I laughed. A hollow, broken sound. "You're leaving? To help my sister?" He nodded as if it were noble. "I'll be back," he said. "This isn't about us. It's about her." I stared at him. The man I once called my safe place. "You're abandoning your wife and your daughter to run off with my sister," I said, voice shaking. "And you think that's kindness?" He winced. "It's not like that." "Then tell me what it's like." But he didn't. He just walked out, suitcase in hand, leaving behind the smell of his cologne and a silence so heavy it pressed on my chest like stone. That night, I tucked Lily into bed and sat alone in the dark. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Inside, I felt hollow. My mind raced with questions that had no answers. How long had it been going on? Did Clara plan this from the start? I wanted to hate her and him, but all I felt was exhaustion. Because betrayal, I realized, doesn't always come with shouting or broken glass. Sometimes it just sits quietly in the corner of your home, smiling while it takes everything. 2 days later, I got a call. A neighbor said she saw Daniel and Clara at the bus station. Clara had Lily's old blanket in her hands. That's when I knew. They weren't just running away together. They were taking my child with them. When I got to the bus station, the air reeked of diesel and rain. The last bus of the night had already gone. The clerk behind the counter looked up when I burst in, breathless, wild-eyed, shaking. "Did you see them?" I demanded. "A man, dark hair, with a woman, brown curls, carrying a small pink blanket?" He blinked, startled. "They just left, headed north." "North?" I repeated, heart thudding. "Where north?" He shrugged. "Didn't say." But the woman looked upset, kept crying. I stood there, the world tilting beneath me. The sound of the departing bus still echoed in my ears, the sound of everything leaving. Daniel, Clara, my child, all gone. The police called it a family dispute. They said Clara was the biological mother, and since she had never formally relinquished custody, there was nothing criminal about her taking Lily. "Technically," the officer said, his tone clipped and rehearsed, "you're not the legal guardian. You were raising the child informally. Without adoption papers, our hands are tied." I wanted to scream, informally, as if 3 years of diapers, lullabies, and scraped knees were a formality, as if love could be erased by paperwork. I spent the next weeks calling every bus depot, every motel, every shelter in 3 states. No one had seen them. Sometimes at night, I thought I heard Lily's voice calling from the hallway, soft, sleepy, "Mommy?" But when I turned, there was nothing, just silence, and the faint smell of Clara's perfume, still clinging to Lily's blanket. Months passed. My house became a museum of what once was, half-packed boxes, Lily's toys gathering dust, Daniel's shirts still hanging in the closet like ghosts. People stopped visiting. They stopped calling too. My mother, our mother, refused to talk about Clara. "She's sick," she'd whisper. "She doesn't know what she's doing." But she did know. Clara had always known how to get what she wanted. As children, she was the golden one, the one who smiled sweetly and got away with everything. I was the shadow she left behind. And now, even as an adult, I was still cleaning up after her, still paying for her mistakes. One rainy afternoon, 6 months after they left, I got a letter. No return address, just my name, scrawled in Daniel's handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. It showed a little cabin in the woods, snow on the roof, smoke curling from the chimney. And in front of it, Lily. She looked older. Her hair was longer. She was holding Clara's hand. Daniel stood behind them, smiling. No note, no words, just the photo. It wasn't proof of life. It was proof of cruelty. They wanted me to know they were happy. But something about the picture didn't sit right. Behind them, through the cabin window, there was a shape, faint, blurred, like someone watching from inside. I thought it was just reflection at first, but when I looked closer, I realized the figure wasn't facing the camera, it was facing them, and it wasn't moving. The more I stared at that photograph, the more the background began to disturb me. There was something wrong with the trees. Too many shadows for that much snow. Too many figures standing still. When I showed it to the police, they dismissed it. Probably just forest workers, they said, or a trick of the light. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was out there, something that had been watching them long before they disappeared. 2 weeks later, another envelope arrived. This time, there was no photograph, only a small note written in Clara's handwriting. "Don't look for us. It's safer this way." I stared at those words until they blurred. Safer from what? If she'd said for Lily, I might have believed her. But safer sounded like a warning, a threat. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard a sound outside. Soft footsteps on the porch. When I opened the door, no one was there. But someone had left something on the welcome mat. A small pink ribbon. Lilies, wet from the rain, and wrapped around it, a torn scrap of paper. "She's not yours anymore." After that, the dreams began. I'd see Clara standing in the woods, barefoot, her eyes hollow. She'd whisper, "You shouldn't have kept her. She was never meant to stay." And behind her, I'd see Daniel, smiling the same gentle smile he'd given me the morning he left. Then Lily would appear between them, her little hands red with something dark, whispering, "Mommy, it's okay now. I'm home." I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, the echo of her voice still ringing in my ears. A year has passed now. No trace of them has ever been found. The cabin in the photograph doesn't exist, not anywhere officials could locate. No matching roofline, no landmarks, no record. It's as if the photo was taken in a place that doesn't exist on any map. But sometimes, at dusk, when the wind blows through the trees, I hear Lily's laugh, faint, distant, and I see small footprints in the mud outside my window. They appear overnight and vanish by morning, always in sets of 3, a man's, a woman's, and a child's. Maybe they're still out there. Maybe they're not. But if you ever find a photograph like the one I did, a cabin that shouldn't exist, with shadows that don't move, burn it. Because some stories aren't meant to be found, and some families were never meant to come home. It was exactly 1 year to the day since they vanished, when I decided to go looking myself. Something inside me, that quiet, trembling thing that had been too afraid to move, finally stood up, not for Daniel, not even for Clara, but for Lily. I couldn't keep living in a house filled with ghosts. I had to see where that photograph had been taken, even if it meant finding nothing at all. I started with what I knew. The photo had been postmarked from a small town in Montana, a name I didn't recognize, a place that barely existed on a map. Just a stop with a gas station and a diner, the post office clerk had said when I called. That was enough. I packed a bag, locked the door, and drove north through the kind of rain that makes the world look washed out and endless. Every mile felt like peeling away another layer of my old life. The woman who baked cookies for PTA meetings, who believed her marriage was solid, who trusted her sister. By the time I crossed into Montana, I felt like someone else entirely. The town was called Ravenscroft, a cluster of 20 houses, one gas pump, and a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and cinnamon. I showed the photograph to the waitress. Her eyes widened. "I know that place," she said quietly. "That's up near the old logging road, about 20 miles north. But it's abandoned. Been that way for years." "Are you sure?" I asked. "I think my family might have lived there." She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Ma'am, people say strange things happen in those woods. Best you don't go alone." I smiled the kind of smile you give when you've already made up your mind. The road leading into the forest was half swallowed by overgrowth. Pines leaned in like spectators, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. By the time I reached the clearing, dusk had already fallen, and there it was, the cabin, exactly like the photograph, same slanted roof, same crooked porch, even the faint outline of the window where I'd seen that strange figure. My breath caught. It was real. I stepped inside. The air was heavy with rot and silence. Dust floated in the light from my flashlight like tiny ghosts suspended in time. Everything was there. Dishes still on the table, a child's sweater draped over a chair, a pair of muddy boots by the door. It was as if they'd just stepped outside and never returned. On the mantel, I found a drawing, crayon on yellow paper. 3 figures, a woman, a man, and a child, all smiling, and above them, written in Lily's handwriting, "My family." My knees went weak. I sank into a chair, the paper trembling in my hands. That's when I heard it, a faint sound from the back room. A creak, like a footstep. "Daniel?" My voice cracked. "Clara?" Silence. Then another sound, a soft thump against the floorboards. I followed it, my flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The back door was slightly open, wind whispering through it, and there, nailed to the inside of the door, was something small and pink, a child's mitten, Lily's. I turned slowly, heart pounding. Something moved in the corner of the room, a shadow shifting just beyond the light. I raised the flashlight and froze. There was a mirror leaning against the wall, cracked across the middle. But it wasn't my reflection staring back. It was Clara's. Her hair was longer, her eyes darker. She looked older, worn, but unmistakable. And beside her, Daniel, holding Lily. They stood there, perfectly still, like a family portrait that refused to fade. I whispered, "Where are you?" Clara's lips parted as if she were about to speak, but instead her reflection reached out and pressed her hand against the glass. The same moment I felt something cold touch my shoulder. I turned. No one was there. When I looked back at the mirror, the image was gone. Only my own reflection, pale, shaking, terrified, and written across the fogged glass as if traced by a child's finger. "We're safe now." Then the light flickered, and the room went black. I don't remember running, but I remember the sound of my car door slamming, my hands trembling so hard I could barely turn the key. I drove until the road disappeared behind me, until the cabin was nothing but a memory swallowed by trees. By the time I reached the highway, the sky was light again. I stopped at a gas station, breathing like I'd just escaped drowning. When I glanced at the back seat, Lily's pink mitten was there. Dry, clean, perfectly folded. I never went back. A few weeks later, a fire swept through that forest. Locals said it started near the old logging road. Lightning strike, most likely. The cabin was gone. Everything gone. But I sometimes wonder if that was the forest's way of erasing what didn't belong. Some places hold memories too heavy to stay standing. I still keep Lily's mitten in a box beside my bed. Some nights I wake up and swear I hear her laugh. Faint, like the sound of a dream slipping away. I tell myself they're together, that wherever they are, they're safe. That love, in some strange way, can outlast even betrayal. Because if I stop believing that, then I'll lose them all over again. People sometimes ask me how I managed to move on after all that. After betrayal, loss, and the silence that came after. The truth is, I didn't move on. Not completely. You don't walk away from something like that untouched. You learn to live beside it. Like a scar that fades but never disappears. For a long time, I tried to make sense of it, to understand why. Why my sister would do something like that. Why my husband, the man who once looked at me like I was the only thing that made sense in his world, would follow her. But I realized something over time. Closure isn't found in answers. It's found in acceptance. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones carrying wounds we'll never see. And those wounds cut through everyone around them. Maybe Clara felt trapped by her choices. Maybe Daniel saw something in her that reminded him of the life he'd lost. Or maybe they were just two broken people who mistook each other's pain for love. It doesn't justify what they did, but it explains how people lose themselves. In the beginning, I hated them. I used to imagine what I'd say if I ever saw them again. All the anger, the betrayal, the questions I wanted to throw at their feet. But anger is a hungry thing. You feed it long enough, and it starts feeding on you. One morning, about 2 years after they disappeared, I found an old video of Lily on my phone. She was sitting in her high chair, covered in oatmeal, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. And for the first time, I smiled. A real smile. That tiny, joyful sound pulled me out of the darkness I'd built around myself. Because that's what love does, doesn't it? It doesn't always heal you, but it reminds you that you were once capable of joy. I moved to a smaller town after that, started a new job at a school. Some of the kids remind me of Lily, curious, full of mischief, endlessly forgiving. I kept her mitten on my desk for a while, like a quiet promise to the universe that I wouldn't let bitterness define me. And slowly, I began to breathe again. Now, when I tell this story, I don't do it to make people sad. I tell it because betrayal isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter, the one where you finally learn who you are when everything safe and familiar has been stripped away. You learn that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. You forgive not because they deserve peace, but because you do. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I still wonder where they went, if they ever looked back, if they ever thought of me. But then I remind myself, not every goodbye deserves an answer. Some stories end with silence, and that's okay, because life goes on, whether we understand it or not. And the heart, for all its fragile seams, knows how to stitch itself back together. So, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if someone took something precious from you and left you with only questions, remember this. The pain doesn't mean you were foolish. It means you loved deeply. It means you were human. And being human, flawed, trusting, breakable, that's still the most beautiful thing in the world. Would I take my sister's child in again, knowing what would happen? Yes, because Lily deserved love, and that's something I'll never regret giving. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is, choosing to love even when the story didn't end the way you wanted. So tell me, would you have done what I did? Would you still open your heart, knowing it might break again? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story reminded you of your own, remember, you're not alone in it. This is Anna. Thank you for listening. And I hope, wherever you are, you find the strength to start again.